Back in 2008, I was asked to write an article about the missional church for Leadership Journal. It was about kind of trends in the missional church. And to be honest, I actually had never even really heard the term. Or I maybe had heard it, but I just didn't know what it meant. So I just said, all right, I'll write about this. And the more I read about it and the more I spoke to people about it, I found myself really captivated by this idea, this just basic idea that every single Christian is called to be a missionary in whatever context God has placed them, that it's not just a term for people who are sent far away to the far reaches of the world. And something about that was appealing to me, I think, as a mom especially, because I was in the throes of raising my kids. They were still pretty young at the time, and I was finding myself floundering in terms of my own identity and struggling with this idea that, okay, now that I'm a mom, does that mean that that's the entirety of who I'm supposed to be? Is that my only identity now? I felt like there was a tension there because I felt like I was called to do more, that my children were important, but that there was more to the mission that God had given me beyond just my kids. And so when this missional idea entered into my frame of reference, I felt like, wow, this is a message I think moms need to hear, this idea that they are called to be missionaries right there where they are, in the home absolutely, but also in whatever context God has placed them, in their neighborhoods, in their schools, in their kids' soccer teams, wherever. That there were so many opportunities to live on mission, if they were willing to kind of open their eyes and see what those possibilities were. So that's kind of how it all started for me, just becoming open to the idea that, okay, God, yes, absolutely has called me to be the mother of my children, and that's critically important, and discipling them is a big part of my mission, but that there was a way still that God wanted to use me beyond just within my family context. And so that, for me, that was really freeing. It's permission to just be open to how God wanted to use me for his missional purposes. It was kind of a convergence of understanding more about the whole idea of being missional. And I feel like I'm still learning. I feel like I'm still a neophyte in a lot of ways to understanding that. But convergence of that plus my own maybe identity issues as a mom, like those two things together were kind of what melded into what emerged as my book. It really opened up a whole new way of thinking about living life, to be honest. So more so than just individual things we've done, I think that we've had a lot of lifestyle changes as a result of trying to consider ourselves a family trying to live missionally. Part of that has been a rejection of cultural trends that I see all around me that are pushing even Christian parents to really put their children at the center of their lives and the accomplishments and achievements of their children kind of front and center. I feel like God really challenged us on some of those areas to say part of your mission is to stand against that. Part of your mission is to show that that's not necessarily the way to live, to make idols of your children and all their activities and all their potential and all their potential accomplishments, to really free yourself from some of those cultural binds. So that led us into homeschooling, and that's another whole story in and of itself, because typically speaking, you might not think of homeschooling and missional as being kind of in the same line of thinking. But for us, it was a way that God actually helped us kind of to break some of those cultural ties. For us, certainly thinking about our neighborhood and our block as being full of missional opportunities. We've been friendly with our neighbors before, but I think it was after we started understanding this concept of missional that we realized, this is a wonderful opportunity for us to just live amidst and amongst people who are our mission field, so to speak. And not that we would treat them as projects per se, but a lot more openness for all of us to really engage with our neighbors and build relationships with our neighbors. In the last 6 years, we've gotten to know our neighbors so much more as a result of just being willing to be open to opportunities to interact with them and not building walls around ourselves as a family, but being willing to go outside of the walls of our house to engage people right around us. So that's been a fun change as we've gotten to know neighbors better. Seeing really every place that we are with people on a consistent basis as being opportunities for mission. So that could be like my kids' music schools or their baseball teams, sports teams, what have you. We started looking at all of those as, okay, every time we go into a situation where we get a chance to interact with people on a regular basis, we are going to say, all right, Lord, give us opportunities to be Jesus to the people around us. So we have lots of just little stories that have come up of times where people have even responded back to us and said, wow, the way that your family is or the way you treated us, it really made an impact on us. And those kinds of stories have been really encouraging. It just made me feel like, okay, clearly we're here for a purpose on this earth, not just to live our lives, but to be agents of God's mission in wherever we are and whatever we're doing. One of my favorite stories is just from a couple years ago. We started talking about this idea that our kids, even though they were young, they were missionaries too. The fact that they were young didn't preclude them from living out their mission for reaching out to the community. And they took that to heart. And so a new boy came into our neighborhood about 4 years ago, who our kids, all three of them, just immediately befriended and got to know him. He became a staple in our house on movie nights, dinners, and we just got a chance to get to know him and a little bit of his parents too, but more got to know this particular boy over the course of a couple of years. And our kids have never taken a class on how to evangelize, and they haven't read anything on reaching out to your community or anything like that. But they love their friend and they love Jesus, and for them it just made perfect sense that those two things had to come together. So they shared the gospel with him once. I remember one summer afternoon I was looking outside, and there was my oldest son was out there with his Bible, and the other two, his two brothers were sitting there on the grass, and their friend was sitting there on the grass too, and they were having like this little open air evangelistic session, like a little crusade, just all four of them, and that boy accepted Christ that day, and it was just this unbelievable, happy time for us all. But I feel like especially what it meant for my kids to live out their calling as God's missionary in that way, and to see that their friend had made that decision was just unbelievably powerful for them. I think it just helped resonate in them the whole reason that they're on this earth. And it's a moment that they have not forgotten. We continue to be wonderful friends with this particular young boy. And little by little, we're getting to know his family, his parents, who are not believers, but that relationship is growing over time. And it was because my kids took the risk and had that conversation with their friend who they wanted to make sure would be able to be in heaven one day. So it's definitely one of the favorite stories for our family over the last couple of years. The cultural pulls on families today is incredibly strong. And that's like the biggest barrier I see for many families, is they get just so sucked into and caught up in the cultural trends to just pour everything into their kids and into just the busyness of life, saying that, okay, we're gonna just follow along with everyone else and make sure our kids are doing 5 different activities each, make sure they're well-rounded, make sure they have every opportunity to excel. Like, that mentality is so strong. I see it everywhere. And when I have been able to just challenge that a little bit and say, you know what, God's mission may not be that your child gets to go to an Ivy League university and do something that might be considered prestigious in the world's eyes. God's mission for you, your son or your daughter, might be something completely different, to live with the least of these, or to go or to be a missionary in another country, or whatever it may be. It may be very different from what you're imagining. And just to give parents the freedom to be able to say no to some of those cultural trends, I think has been really freeing. And yet those are the things that tend to prevent them from being able to live on mission. It's that pressure that our society pushes on us to be successful in the world's definition of success. Sometimes when you're trying to build those friendships or you're trying to build those relationships, for whatever reason, there's a barrier. And it may happen when they find out you're a Christian, or and I don't know if that is the reason for the barrier or not. Maybe because they just didn't like us, and that happens. So I guess part of the deal is that you will experience rejection. There will be times when you feel like, I'm doing this for the Lord. Why would there be rejection? But it happens. Where there are times when people don't respond the way that you hoped or expected, or maybe things look promising in the beginning, and then there is just some distance that appears, and you don't know why. I think that can be that sometimes you feel the feeling of failure, even though at the same time you know that it's all in the Lord's hands, and He will open doors as He opens doors, and to continue to be faithful, even if you don't know why things turn out the way they turn out. sometimes I think that we think things are going to happen faster than they will. So I mentioned the friend that my kids led to Christ. I mean, our relationship with his parents is growing, but it's taking a lot longer. And I don't know, again, kids have like less barriers, can easily connect, whereas with the parents, they know we're Christians, they know we led their son to Christ, so there's a little bit, of wariness, I think, on their part. But again, we're just trying to be patient, and we're not trying to push too hard. We're trying to take our time with it. But there's part of me that sometimes wishes that, things would go faster and move faster, and I have to trust that things move in the Lord's time, and I can't always orchestrate the situation or relationships the way I want, that we have to be willing to be patient and to trust that, you plant a seed and sometimes it takes decades, for things to bloom. We just don't know what that time will be. So I think that there's an emphasis or a overemphasis on results. Like if you're living missionally, then you're going to see all these people come to Christ, and you're going to see all these results, great results for the kingdom. And I think that can be a barrier, because I don't think it is that at all, actually. It's, our being faithful to God, to the mission that God gives us, and he's responsible for what happens in terms of the end result. So I think that's hard sometimes for us as Western Christians to embrace and accept that the results are not necessarily in our hands, and we have to accept that and embrace that. This is a fun story. So my family had just moved into this apartment complex in this town outside of D.C. in Annandale, Virginia. I was 5.5 and just playing outside by myself. I think it was a summer afternoon, because I remember it being warm. And this man approached wearing a suit. I think it was a blue suit. And he just sat down and he just started speaking to me. And he basically invited me to church. He said, I have a bus that comes every Sunday. We go to a Baptist church on the street. Interested in coming? And I had seen that blue bus come every week. I was curious because I had seen kids kind of walk onto that bus and then go. I didn't know where they were going. I didn't know what they were doing, but it sounded fun. So I said, okay, let me ask my parents. This is a different time and a different era, because my parents were totally fine with my going with this strange man on this blue bus that would take me to church every Sunday. It was a Baptist church, Fairfax Baptist Temple. I still remember the name. And I would go there every Sunday by myself, as a nearly 6-year-old, to children's church every Sunday. And that is where I learned all my foundational Bible stories. I still remember the flannel graphs and all the great stories I learned from the Bible in that church. And they had altar calls every week. So after about a year, I responded to one of those altar calls, and it was because that particular pastor, took the time to come sit down with this random kid, me, just sitting by herself on the playground, and took that risk to invite me. And I don't know if that happens anymore these days, where, children's pastors just go and meet random kids and invite them to church, and if parents would let their kids do that. But that's how it happened for me.